The moon-called Varan 6 hung like a dull pearl above the mining lanes. Cargo lights blinked in slow rhythm, and dust drifted through the thin atmosphere like quiet snow. Captain Elias Ward guided his small freighter, the Kestrel, toward a repair dock that looked tired and half asleep. He was a human far from any friendly port, and he wanted only fuel, fresh filters, and a little silence. Inside the control cabin, screens showed routine messages, docking vectors, fee notices, warnings about loose debris. Elias sighed, set the ship on auto-adjust, and rubbed the scar across his knuckles. He was not a soldier now. He was a miner and a courier. He carried ore when he could, tools when he must, and memories all the time. The dock clamped onto the Kestrel with a metallic thud. Air surged. Lights shifted from red to green. Elias grabbed his jacket and a simple toolkit. He planned to fix a faulty coolant line and then sleep. That was the plan, until he heard a sound that did not belong to a quiet dock. It was a sharp, frightened breath from somewhere in the cargo bay. Elias froze. He listened. He heard it again. Soft but clear. Someone trying not to make a sound. He moved down the ladder, step by careful step. The cargo bay was dim. Boxes were strapped in neat rows. A yellow maintenance drone rested on silent legs. The bay smelled like oil and cold metal. The sound came from behind a stack of crates near the emergency locker. "Hello?" Elias said. His voice was even. He did not want to scare whoever was hiding. "If you're a dock worker, we can talk. If you need help, say something." No answer. Only the hiss of the ship's life support and the slow drip of coolant from a pipe he still needed to fix. Elias set his toolkit down and lifted his palms to show they were empty. He walked around the crates and found a young alien woman crouched behind them. She was not like any worker he had seen in these lanes. Her posture was proud even in fear, and a small metal crest was clipped to her collar, shaped like a sunrise over 3 stars. She wore travel armor that had been burned and torn. One shoulder plate was cracked. Transparent blood, pale violet, had dried along the seam. Her eyes, bright and searching, watched him like 2 sharp knives that refused to draw blood unless forced. She flinched when their eyes met. Her hand went to the crest as if to hide it. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was musical but tired. "If you are human, do not call the guards." Elias did not move closer. He kept his tone calm. "I am human. Name is Elias. This is my ship. You're on it." She glanced toward the sealed hatch to the dock corridor. "They are outside," she said. "Mercenaries, they chase me. If they find me, I will vanish for real." "Why my ship?" Elias asked. "It was closest," she said. "And I thought, humans are stubborn. Maybe one will listen." He almost smiled. "We can be stubborn," he said. "Are you hurt?" "A little," she said. "Not bad. I can stand." She tried to stand and swayed. Elias stepped forward without thinking, then stopped himself when her eyes narrowed in warning. He raised his hands again. "It's okay," he said. "I won't touch you. May I get a med pack from that locker? You can use it yourself." She studied his face, then gave a small nod. Elias moved slowly, unsealed the locker, and took out a compact med pack. He placed it on the crate between them and stepped back. She opened it with quick, practiced fingers and sprayed a sealant across the cracked shoulder plate. The gel hardened to a new layer. "You know what you're doing," Elias said. "I learned," she replied. Her gaze drifted to the crest again, as if it weighed more than armor. "Thank you." "You're welcome," he said. "What should I call you?" She hesitated. "Lyra," she said at last. "Lyra," he repeated. "All right. Why are mercenaries after you, Lyra?" Her eyes lifted to his. She seemed to measure his question and the man who asked it. "Because someone wants me gone," she said, voice quiet and steady. And because if I speak in the wrong hall, lights will fall from the ceiling. Sounds like trouble above my pay grade, Elias said. But you're here now. A new sound cut through the ship. 3 firm knocks on the outer hatch. Not the random clang of dock noise, but a signal. Then, a voice through the speaker. Freighter Kestrel, this is Dock Patrol 2. Routine inspection. Open hatch. Lyra's breath quickened. She pressed herself into the shadow of the crates. Not patrol, she whispered. They bribe the dock. They wear patrol badges, but they are paid blades. Elias stared at the speaker. His options, formed in a quick, clean line. If he opened the hatch, strangers would walk in. If he refused, they would get suspicious. He did not like either. He pressed the intercom. Dock Patrol 2, I'm in a critical repair. Coolant line's leaking. Can you give me 10 minutes? A pause. Then, open now, or we lock you down. He muted the line and looked at Lyra. Her fear cut through his last doubts. This was real. Someone hunted her, and she did not trust her own people here. Elias looked around his bay, mind moving like a mechanic's hand. Tools, crates, lines, valves. Do you trust me for 5 minutes? He asked. Lyra stared at him. I chose your ship because I had to, she said. Now I choose it because I want to. Yes, 5 minutes. Good, Elias said. Hide inside that maintenance drone's cavity. It is hollow for storage. I will magnet lock the shell. They will see a drone, not a person. She nodded and climbed into the compact space with surprising grace. Elias sealed the panel with a soft click and wiped the prints with his sleeve. He pressed the intercom. Opening hatch, he said. The inner door cycled open. 3 figures stepped in. They wore dock patrol colors, but their boots were too clean and their eyes were too focused. The lead one, a tall figure with a metal jawband, did not look at the coolant leak. He looked at the crates. Routine inspection, the leader said. Step aside. Elias leaned on a pipe and kept his face relaxed. Watch your step, he said. I have a leak and the floor is slick. The second mercenary moved toward the crates. The third glanced at the maintenance drone. This yours? He asked. Rental, Elias said. Dock issue. It's broken. Useless weight. The man kicked one leg of the drone. The shell thudded. Inside, Lyra did not move or breathe, at least not in a way that made sound. The leader stepped closer to Elias. We are looking for a person, he said. Young, wears a crest. If you saw anyone like that, you will speak now. Elias shook his head. Only person aboard is me, he said, unless you count the leak. The leader studied him. Humans lie, he said. Everyone lies sometimes, Elias replied, but not about leaks. The second mercenary reached for the emergency locker. Elias's mind flashed through outcomes. He needed to keep them away from anything that looked like a hiding place. He dropped to a knee and twisted a valve on the coolant line. The pipe hissed and sprayed a thin white mist across the floor. The mercenaries cursed and stepped back. Careful, Elias shouted. You breathe that without a mask, you will feel sick for a week. Inspection can wait. The leader swore again and waved his hand. Fine, he said. Cycle the air and fix your mess. We will return. They backed out, sealed the hatch, and the heavy lock clanked into place. Elias twisted the valve back, and the hiss died. He stood still and listened. Boots echoed down the corridor, then faded. He exhaled and unlocked the maintenance drone. The panel swung open. Lyra slid out, pale but steady. You were right, she said softly. Paid blades. Yeah, Elias said. He wiped coolant from his sleeve. They will come back with masks. We cannot wait. We? She asked. Elias shrugged. You hid in my ship. That makes you my problem for now, he said. Besides, if they catch you here, they will pull my ship apart. I like my ship. A small smile touched her face and was gone. "Then go," she said. "But if you fly, the dock will log your departure. They will follow." "Not if their log goes blind," Elias said. He moved to a wall panel and pried it open. Inside lay a bundle of cable and a plain metal chip wired to the dock interface. It was a legal tool in some places and a frowned-on fixer in others, but out here, many captains had one. He slotted it into the port. The dock's green status lights flickered, then held steady. "What did you do?" Lyra asked. "Gave the dock a small, polite confusion," Elias said. "For the next 15 minutes, every ship in this ring looks like a warehouse. No arrivals, no departures, no alarms." "You are more than a miner," she said. "I am a human who learns," he said. "Same as you." He moved to the pilot seat and powered the Kestrel's engines. The ship trembled and then settled. He checked the external camera. The corridor was empty. The dock doors ahead were closed, but they responded to his signal with a heavy groan and pulled apart just enough for a small ship to squeeze through. "Strap in," Elias said. Lyra dropped into the co-pilot chair and pulled the harness across her chest. She looked smaller. When sitting, more like a traveler than a symbol. Yet the crest on her collar caught the cabin light. Elias saw it. The asteroid belt around Varan 6 was a maze of drifting stone and broken metal. Shattered mining rigs clung to some rocks like old scars, and forgotten cargo containers floated in slow arcs. Elias guided the Kestrel carefully, weaving between shadows. The hum of the engines was low, steady, and purposeful. Beside him, Lyra sat in the co-pilot seat, eyes sharp as she scanned the star-speckled dark. She kept her injured shoulder still, but Elias noticed her fingers brushing the crest on her collar whenever the ship tilted into a tight turn. He didn't ask why. He had learned that silence sometimes earned more trust than questions. The comm screen flashed once, an incoming signal. Elias frowned and switched it to a private channel. Static hissed. Then a smooth voice spoke. "Unregistered freighter Kestrel. This is Patrol Command. Your vessel left dock without proper clearance. Transmit your cargo and passenger list immediately." Elias muted the channel and leaned back in his seat. "Not good," he murmured. "They're already tracking us." Lyra's gaze locked on him. "If you send the list, they'll see me. If you refuse, they'll chase harder." "Exactly," Elias said. "So, we make them look somewhere else." He tapped the console, rerouting the ship's ID signal. Within seconds, the Kestrel was broadcasting as a different vessel, a mining barge called the Gray Lantern, registered 3 sectors away. The trick wouldn't fool a deep scan, but it could buy them time. "Will that work?" Lyra asked. "For a while," Elias said. "But we need somewhere to hide and refuel before they tighten the net." "There is no safe place for me," Lyra said, her tone matter-of-fact. "My pursuers have money. They will pay any port to look the other way." "Then we don't dock at a port," Elias replied. He angled the ship toward a cluster of faint lights deeper in the belt. "There's a scrap market ahead. Half legal, half rumor. Too many ships, too many signals. If we vanish in that noise, they'll have to guess where we went." The scrap market floated inside a hollowed asteroid, its rough walls patched with steel and glowing lamps. Dozens of mismatched ships drifted around the entrance, some with hulls barely holding together. Inside, a tangle of platforms and walkways formed a chaotic web. Vendors sold anything that could move through space: engine cores, fuel cells, scavenged, hull panels, even antique radios. Elias set the Kestrel down on a side platform away from the main traffic lanes. "We keep our heads down," he told Lyra. "I'll get fuel and parts. You stay inside." Her chin lifted slightly. "I will not hide while you take the risk alone." "You stand out," Elias said, glancing at her armor and crest. Lyra considered. This then unclipped the crest and slipped it into a pocket. Without it, she looked less like royalty and more like a traveler in worn gear. "Better?" she asked. "Better," Elias admitted. "Just stay close." The market was a storm of sound, shouts in a dozen languages, the clang of tools on metal, the hum of old engines being tested. The air smelled of oil, smoke, and cooked starch from food stalls wedged between parts shops. Elias led Lyra through narrow aisles toward a fuel vendor he trusted. He noticed her eyes moving constantly, taking in every detail. The quick handoffs. Between traders, the small fights that ended as quickly as they began, the silent glances between guards in patched armor. She walked like someone who had been trained to be alert. Halfway to the vendor, Elias felt it, a shadow following them. Not close enough to touch, but always just behind. He slowed near a stall selling cracked navigation screens, pretending to examine them. In the reflection of the glass, he caught sight of a man with a hood and a smooth, expressionless face. "Keep walking," Elias murmured. "Is he one of them?" Lyra asked quietly. "Probably," Elias said. "Which means we're about to have company." They reached the fuel vendor's platform, a cramped shop lit by a single flickering lamp. The vendor, a small reptilian trader named Hask, looked up and grinned. "Elias, thought you were working the inner lanes." "Changed routes," Elias said. "Need fuel cells and a coolant filter." Hask pulled the parts from a shelf, but his smile faded as his eyes flicked past Elias. "You've got trouble," he muttered. The man in the hood had stopped at the edge of the platform. Two more figures joined him, both wearing the same false patrol colors Elias had seen at the dock. They began to close in. Elias grabbed the parts and handed Hask a credit chit. "Keep the change," he said. Then he turned to Lyra. "Time to move." They slipped into a narrow maintenance corridor behind the shop, the sound of boots quickening behind them. The corridor twisted and branched, filled with shadows and the distant thrum of the market's main reactor. Elias led the way, but the mercenaries knew the paths. They were getting closer. At a junction, Elias stopped and scanned the walls. A half-broken service lift stood open, its interior dark. He stepped inside, pulling Lyra with him. "Hold on," he said, slamming the control lever down. The lift groaned and dropped toward the lower decks. The mercenaries reached the junction just as the doors slid shut. One shouted, and a shot of stun energy sizzled against the metal, leaving a black mark. The lift rattled to a stop in a dim storage bay. Elias led Lyra out and into a maze of stacked containers. The air here was colder, quieter. He found a maintenance hatch low to the ground and pried it open. "In here," he said. "It leads to the outer platforms. From there we can get back to the ship." Lyra hesitated. "Why are you doing this for me, Elias? You could leave me here and be safe." Elias met her gaze. "Safe isn't worth much if you walk away from someone who needs help." Her eyes softened for just a moment before she climbed into the hatch. Elias followed, sealing it behind them. The maintenance tunnel was narrow, forcing them to crawl in single file. The hum of the market faded, replaced by the soft echo of their movements. Lyra spoke quietly as they moved. "My people do not believe humans can be trusted," she said. "But you have risked your life for me twice now." "Your people haven't met the right humans," Elias said. They emerged onto a small observation platform overlooking the outer hull of the market. The Kestrel was 2 platforms away. Between them and the ship, a patrol craft hovered, scanning each vessel. "They're fast," Elias muttered. "We'll need a distraction." Elias spotted an unmanned cargo tug drifting nearby. He moved to its control panel and bypassed the lock. "When I start this, it's going to crash into that fuel barge," he explained. "No real damage, just a lot of noise. While they're looking, we move." He started the tug and it jolted forward, scraping sparks across the dock before slamming into the barge with a loud, echoing clang. Alarms blared. The patrol craft turned toward the commotion. "Go!" Elias shouted. They ran along the outer walkway, boots ringing on the metal. Lyra kept pace easily, despite her injury. The Kestrel's ramp was down. Elias sprinted aboard and hit the controls. The engines roared to life, and the ship lifted from the platform. The patrol craft noticed too late, surging after them as the Kestrel shot into the open belt. Elias cut hard between two drifting rocks, engines straining. Behind them, the patrol craft gave chase, but in the asteroid shadows, a small freighter could vanish like a drop in a storm. Lyra dropped into the co-pilot seat, breathing hard but steady. "You didn't have to save me," she said again. "I didn't," Elias said, adjusting the flight path. "I chose to. Big difference." She watched him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then maybe I chose the right human after all." The Kestrel slipped deeper into the belt, carrying its unlikely crew toward whatever waited next. The asteroid belt thinned as the Kestrel pushed into open space, but the danger didn't fade. The false patrol craft hadn't been the only hunters. Somewhere behind them, bounty trackers were already moving, following the faint ripples left in the void by a ship's passing. Elias knew the signs. He had been chased before, though never for a passenger like this. Inside the cockpit, the hum of the engines blended with the quiet beeps of the nav console. Lyra sat in the co-pilot seat, her gaze fixed on the stars rushing past. She was silent, but her posture was tense. Every so often, her fingers brushed the hidden crest in her pocket, as though making sure it was still there. "You don't have to tell me everything right now," Elias said, breaking the long silence. "But if I'm going to keep you alive, I need to know what's chasing us." Lyra's eyes shifted toward him, studying his face. She seemed to weigh the cost of speaking against the risk of saying nothing. "If I tell you," she said quietly, "you will know a truth my enemies would kill to bury." "I'm already on their list," Elias said. "Might as well know why." She leaned back, her voice low but steady. "I am Lyra Velsorin, daughter of Queen Avalra of the Sorin Dominion. 2 weeks ago, I was sent to a border moon for peace talks with a neighboring system. Instead of diplomats, I met with betrayal." Elias didn't interrupt. He kept his eyes on the flight path but listened closely. "One of my mother's highest advisors, a man she has trusted for years, arranged for me to be taken. The mercenaries you saw were hired by him. He plans to tell the court that humans kidnapped me. He will use my death as proof that peace is impossible." "And he gets power out of it?" Elias guessed. Lyra nodded. "With me gone, the line of succession weakens. He becomes the Queen's only voice of counsel, and war against your kind would strengthen his position even more." Elias let out a slow breath. "So if we're caught, it's not just your life. On the line, it's a war between humans and your people." "Yes," she said. "A war neither side would survive." The console beeped. Elias frowned. "Someone's pinging us," he said. A red light flashed, an incoming lock signal. Before either could speak, the ship shook under a sharp jolt. Lyra gripped the armrests. "What was that?" "They tagged us with a tracking dart," Elias said. "Tiny, magnetic, and hard to shake. Off, which means they'll be here soon." He angled the Kestrel toward a nearby cluster of drifting wrecks. Old ships, gutted by time, floated together in slow orbits, a graveyard from some long-forgotten battle. "If we can hide among these wrecks, maybe we can pull the dart before they catch up." The wreckage field was a labyrinth of twisted metal and frozen hulls. Elias threaded the Kestrel through narrow gaps, scraping the paint once or twice, but avoiding anything that would tear the ship open. He cut the engines and let them drift into the shadow of a massive battleship carcass. They grabbed tools from the storage locker and headed for the airlock. Outside, in the cold silence of space, their suits' lights swept over the hull of the Kestrel until they found it, a small dark disk no bigger than a coin, magnetized to the outer panel, Elias worked quickly, but the dart was designed to resist removal. It clung tight, almost humming with energy. "It's fused to the panel," he muttered. "I'll have to cut it off." Before he could start, movement caught Lyra's eye, a faint glint in the wreckage, growing brighter. "Elias," she said sharply, "they're here." A small hunter craft slipped between the wrecks, its searchlight slicing through the shadows. The craft was fast, built for pursuit. It began sweeping the area, moving closer with each pass. Elias clenched his jaw. "No time for clean work!" He slammed his cutter against the dart, sending sparks into the void. The tracker broke free and tumbled into the wreckage. He kicked it hard, sending it spinning deep into the field. The hunter craft's lights turned toward the movement, following the false signal. Elias grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her toward the airlock. They climbed inside and cycled the doors. Shut. The moment the inner hatch sealed, Elias slammed into the pilot seat and powered the engines. "Hold on," he warned. The Kestrel surged forward, weaving through wrecks at dangerous speeds. The hunter craft realized its mistake and gave chase, but the narrow passages between shattered hulls worked in Elias's favor. He skimmed along, the side of a broken cruiser, then dove into a gap barely wider than the ship's wings. The hunter followed, too closely. Elias flicked a switch, venting a burst of coolant from the rear vents. The sudden white cloud blinded the hunter's sensors. It clipped the edge of the wreck and spun away, smoke spilling from its side. "That was close," Lyra said, her voice tight. "Close is better than caught," Elias replied, steering them out of the wreckage and into open space once more. For a while, neither spoke. The stars stretched around them, vast and silent. Lyra finally broke the quiet. "You risked your life for me again. You could have left the dart and fled." "Not my style," Elias said. "Besides, you were out there too. We either make it together or not at all." Lyra studied him. "In my people's tongue, there is a word, Vorish. It means a bond formed under fire. It is rare, and it is never broken." Elias glanced at her. "Sounds like trust." "It is more than trust," she said softly. "It is choosing to stand back to back, no matter the enemy." The console beeped again, this time not a threat, but a navigation warning. They were nearing a dense cluster of wormholes, their shimmering blue edges twisting the light around them. Most were unstable, dangerous to enter, but one glowed steady and bright. "If we take that wormhole," Elias said, "we can put half the galaxy between us and your pursuers." "And if it collapses?" Lyra asked. "We find out the hard way," Elias said with a faint smile. She smiled back, a rare, brief flicker of warmth. "Then we choose the risk together." Elias angled, the Kestrel toward the wormhole. The swirling blue light filled the cockpit, painting their faces in cold fire. Lyra's hand rested lightly on the edge of the console, steady despite the danger ahead. As the ship crossed the event horizon, the stars outside stretched into bright lines, then vanished. The Kestrel dove into a tunnel of shifting light, its hull shivering under the strain. The nav system flickered with warnings, but Elias kept his hands steady on the controls. For a moment, it felt like they were falling through the heart of the galaxy. Then the light faded, and the black void returned. Different stars, different space. Elias checked the sensors. "We're clear, no sign of pursuit." Lyra let out a slow breath. "Then for now, we live." "Yeah," Elias said, leaning back. "For now." But in the quiet that followed, both knew the chase wasn't over. Somewhere in another part of the galaxy, the traitor in the Sorin court would already be planning the next move. And Elias had the growing sense that saving Lyra was no longer just about survival. It was about stopping a war before it began. And maybe, just maybe, the Vorish bond she spoke of was already forming, forged in the fire they had both walked through together. The wormhole had given them distance, but not safety. Elias knew that a pursuer with enough credits could still trace their path. The trick now was to stay unpredictable. The Kestrel drifted through a quiet stretch of space. Far ahead, a faint, silver glow marked the edge of a populated sector. On the nav display, Elias pointed to a single blinking marker. That's Orvan Station. It's alien-controlled, and their security isn't friendly to humans, but it's the only place where we can find what we need. And what is that? Lyra asked, leaning closer to the screen. Evidence, Elias said. If we're going to stop your pursuers and clear my name, we need to prove the betrayal. The man behind this, your mother's advisor, he'll have hidden records. Orvan Station is where they trade secrets, and where we might steal one. Lyra nodded slowly. Then we go. But we cannot walk in as ourselves. Hours later, the Kestrel approached the station. Orvan hung in space like a giant ring wrapped around a silver core, with hundreds of ships docking along its outer edges. Bright banners in alien script floated across its hull. Security craft drifted near the entrances, scanning every vessel. Elias adjusted their ship's profile to look like a small parts trader. If anyone asks, he told Lyra, we're delivering scrap processors from the Lathram Belt. Keep your head down and don't speak unless you must. Inside the station's docking bay, the air smelled of metal and hot circuits. Voices in dozens of languages echoed off the high walls. Elias and Lyra stepped into the crowd, blending with traders, smugglers, and travelers. Lyra wore a plain gray travel cloak, her crest hidden deep in her pocket. Elias carried a small case filled with tools, though most of them were for show. Their target was a private data vault in the inner levels of the station. According to Elias's contacts, the vault stored communications for high-ranking clients, messages that could be purchased, erased, or accidentally copied for the right price. Getting there meant slipping past 2 layers of security. The first was a checkpoint guarded by Orvan's station wardens, tall, scaled aliens in dark armor. Elias approached calmly, handing over a forged trader pass. The warden scanned it, then looked up. Reason for visit? Delivering parts to a client in Section 9, Elias said smoothly. The warden stared at him for a moment longer, then waved them through. Lyra kept her gaze low until they were out of sight. The second barrier was harder, a sealed door leading to the vault's service corridors. Elias knelt by the panel, using his toolkit to bypass the lock. Lyra stood watch, her eyes scanning. The hall. How do you know this place? She asked quietly. I've been here before, Elias said without looking up. Different job, different reason. Didn't end well, but I learned the layout. The lock clicked open, and they slipped. Inside, the corridor beyond was dim, lit only by narrow strips along the floor. They reached the vault's outer room. A single guard sat at a console, tapping lazily at a screen. Elias motioned for Lyra to stay back. He stepped forward, holding a small metal cylinder. Lost and found delivery, Elias said casually. This was left in the docking bay. The guard frowned, taking the cylinder. As he examined it, Elias tapped a hidden switch on his wrist device. The cylinder released a soft hiss, and the guard slumped forward, asleep. You carry sleeping gas? Lyra whispered as they moved past. I carry options, Elias replied. Inside the vault, walls of data cores hummed softly, their surfaces glowing with coded light. Elias moved quickly, linking his wrist device to the main terminal. Strings of alien script flowed across the screen as he searched for records tied to the Queen's advisor. Minutes passed. Lyra paced quietly, every sound from the corridor making her tense. Finally, Elias found it. Encrypted messages between the advisor and the mercenary leaders, arranging Lyra's capture and framing humans for the act. The messages even contained instructions to ensure the human dies with her. "This is it," Elias said. "Enough to clear my name and expose him." But before they could leave, an alarm blared. Red lights flashed across the vault. The Sako, sleeping guard, must have been found. Elias shoved the data device into his jacket. "Time to go," he said. They ran back through the corridors, footsteps echoing against the metal. Voices shouted behind them. More guards were coming. Lyra moved ahead, scanning for exits. "This way!" she called, spotting a narrow maintenance shaft. They climbed inside, the metal rungs cold under their hands. Halfway down the shaft, Lyra froze. A guard at the bottom was climbing up toward them, weapon in hand. Elias cursed under his breath. "We don't have time to fight." He reached for a cable running along the shaft wall and yanked it free. Sparks flew and the lights in the shaft flickered. The guard paused, momentarily blinded. Elias dropped down, grabbing the guard's weapon and shoving him aside without striking hard enough to cause lasting harm. "Go!" Elias shouted. Lyra climbed down the rest of the way, and they sprinted into the lower service tunnels. The tunnels opened into a crowded repair market. The noise and movement gave them cover. Elias led them through winding paths until they reached the docking bay. The Kestrel was waiting, its engines already running thanks to a remote start command Elias had sent earlier. As they ran up the ramp, shouts echoed behind them, security guards pushing through the crowd. Elias slammed the ramp, controls sealing the hatch. The Kestrel lifted from the bay. Two station craft tried to intercept, but Elias gunned the engines, weaving through the outbound traffic until they broke free into open space. Inside the cockpit, Lyra pulled the hood from her head and looked at him. "You risked everything to get this evidence," she said. "Even your life." "You were right," Elias said, catching his breath. "Without proof, this doesn't end. Now we have it." She studied him for a long moment. "Where I come from, this is the part where I swear loyalty to you until the debt is repaid." "I'm not looking for loyalty," Elias said, checking the nav display. "Just a chance to make sure neither of us ends up dead." But deep down, Lyra knew it was more than that. She could see it in his actions, in the way he refused to abandon her even when escape would have been easier. And though she had been taught not to trust humans, she felt the bond between them growing stronger, a bond tested by danger and strengthened each time they chose to stand together. Elias set a course toward the Sorin homeworld. "Time to give your mother some news," he said. Lyra's eyes softened. "For the first time in many days, I believe she will hear it." The Kestrel sped into the dark, carrying proof that could change the fate of two worlds. The journey to the Sorin homeworld was not a quiet one. Even with the evidence safely stored in Elias's jacket, the air aboard the Kestrel was heavy. The stars outside drifted past in silent rivers, but inside the cockpit, both knew the next step would be the most dangerous. Sorin Prime was not a place a human could simply walk into. The capital city was deep inside the planet's secure territory, guarded by fleets and planetary shields. Elias had to trust that Lyra's presence, and the proof they carried, would keep them alive long enough to speak. As they approached the system, Lyra activated the ship's comm. Her voice was steady, but Elias could sense the tension behind it. "This is Princess Lyra Vel Sorin of the Sorin Dominion. Open the gates." There was a pause. Then a voice answered, sharp and formal. "Your Highness, you were declared lost. Identify yourself by royal code." Lyra tapped a sequence into the console. A faint chime confirmed her identity. Another long pause followed before the voice returned. "Proceed to the royal landing bay. The Queen is expecting you." Elias caught the faint hesitation in that last phrase. He didn't like it. Sorin Prime filled the view, a vast green and silver world, its oceans dotted with floating cities. Towering spires rose from the capital, gleaming under the sun. As they descended, Elias saw the royal palace, a fortress of crystal and steel with landing bays built into its upper levels. The Kestrel touched down on a platform lined with royal guards in deep blue armor. Lyra stepped forward, her cloak pulled back to reveal her face. Gasps rippled through the guards as they recognized her. The captain of the guard stepped forward. "Your Highness, we thought—" He stopped, his eyes shifting to Elias. His voice cooled. "And who is this human?" Lyra's tone was firm. "He is my rescuer. Without him, I would not be standing here." The captain's jaw tightened, but he stepped aside. "The Queen awaits." Inside the palace, the halls were vast and filled with light from high crystal windows. Every step echoed. Elias followed a pace behind Lyra, feeling dozens of eyes on him. Servants and officials paused in their work, whispering as they passed. At last, they entered the throne hall, a long chamber with a vaulted ceiling, the floor lined with polished stone. At the far end, upon a raised platform, sat Queen Avalra. She was tall and regal, her silver crown glinting in the sunlight. Her eyes were sharp, the same deep shade as Lyra's, though colder. For a moment the queen didn't move, her gaze fixed on her daughter, as if trying to believe she was real. Then she rose, stepping forward slowly. Lyra, the queen's voice was softer than Elias expected. "I was told you were gone." "I was nearly gone," Lyra said, her voice trembling just slightly. She glanced toward Elias. "But he saved me." The queen's eyes shifted to the human, narrowing. "A human?" The word carried both surprise and suspicion. "You arrive at my court with him? Do you know what is being said across the Dominion?" "Yes," Lyra said, "and I know who is saying it. Mother, we have been betrayed." She stepped forward, drawing the data device from her pocket. With a flick of her hand, a projection appeared in the air, intercepted messages between the queen's own advisor and the mercenaries who had taken her. Each message was a thread in a web of lies, designed to frame humans and push the Dominion toward war. Gasps filled the hall. The queen's face darkened as the truth unfolded. "This is not possible," one of the royal counselors said sharply, stepping forward. "The advisor has served the crown for decades." Lyra turned on him, her voice cutting through the chamber. "And he served himself before the crown. These messages are real. My life was his weapon, and my death would have been his victory." The queen looked at Elias. "And you? You risked your life to bring her back? Even knowing that my people would see you as an enemy?" Elias met her gaze evenly. "I didn't care what your people thought. I cared about getting her home alive. That's all." For a long moment the queen studied him, as if weighing his words. Then she turned to her guards. "Find him. Bring him before me in chains." The captain of the guard bowed and hurried from the room, the order ringing with finality. When the queen faced her daughter again, her tone was softer. "You have been through much, Lyra. You will tell me everything. But for now—" She hesitated, then stepped forward and pulled Lyra into an embrace. "For now, I am only glad you are here." Lyra's breath caught, and for a moment, she looked like she might break into tears, but she held steady. "I am here, Mother, because he saved me." She glanced back at Elias again, making sure the words were heard by all. The queen's gaze followed hers, lingering on the human. Something in her expression shifted, not quite trust, but not outright suspicion either. The council began murmuring among themselves, some voices angry, others uncertain. Elias could feel the tension in the air. This was not over. Even with proof, not everyone would believe it. Some might still want war. The queen raised her hand, silencing the room. "Until the traitor is in my custody, these accusations will not leave this hall. If what you have brought is true, then you have done more than return my daughter. You may have saved the Dominion itself." Elias inclined his head, but said nothing. When the queen dismissed the court, guards escorted Elias and Lyra to a private chamber. It was a smaller, quieter space, with a wide window overlooking the city below. Lyra sank into a chair, her posture finally relaxing for the first time since they'd arrived. "That went better than I feared," she admitted. Elias leaned against the wall. "Better? Half the room still wants me thrown in a cell," her lips curved into a small smile. "Yes, but the other half might just invite you to dinner." He chuckled softly, but his eyes remained wary. "We're not safe yet. Until that traitor is caught, anyone loyal to him could still come for you. Or for me. Then we face them," Lyra said simply. Night fell over the city, its towers glowing like stars brought down to the ground. Elias stood at the window, watching the movement of airships between the spires. Lyra joined him, her reflection beside his in the glass. "You've walked into danger twice for me," she said quietly. "My people have a word for that. Vorish, a bond forged in danger." "You told me about it before," Elias said. "I think we might be in it now." She nodded, her eyes on the city lights. "If we are, then nothing will break it." Outside, the capital shone in the dark, bright, beautiful, and filled with both hope and danger. Inside, two unlikely allies stood together, knowing that the final confrontation was close. Morning light spilled across the royal city, turning the crystal spires into rivers of gold. From the palace balcony, Elias could see the wide courtyards filling with citizens. News of the princess's return had spread overnight, carried by whispers and guarded rumors, but not everyone believed. Many still thought the human standing beside her was part of some trick, the very man who had kidnapped her. The real trial wasn't in surviving the journey here. It was in convincing the entire Dominion of the truth. A knock sounded at the chamber door. The queen's voice followed. "It is time." Lyra turned to Elias, her eyes steady. "Today, the court hears everything. If they believe us, there will be peace. If they don't," Elias gave a small nod, "then we make them believe." The throne hall was already filled when they entered. Royal counselors stood along the walls, military leaders lined the steps, and representatives from across the Dominion had gathered in balconies above. The air was tense, the way it feels before a storm breaks. The queen sat upon the throne, her crown catching the morning light. When Lyra stepped forward, the hall grew silent. "My daughter returns," the queen said, her voice carrying across the chamber. "And she claims to bring proof of treachery. Let all present witness what she has to say." Lyra stood tall, though Elias could see the faint tremor in her hands. She touched the data device at her side, then began. "I was sent on a mission of peace," she said. "But those who should have protected me arranged my capture. They paid mercenaries, then planned to blame humans for the act. This man," she turned toward Elias, "risked his life again and again to bring me home." A murmur rippled through the hall. Some eyes softened, others narrowed in doubt. One counselor stepped forward. "And who would dare such treachery?" Lyra raised the device. "I will show you." She activated the projection. Messages appeared in the air, glowing in the hall's light. They carried the seal of the Queen's trusted advisor, detailing payments, orders, and instructions to ensure both her and the human never returned alive. Gasps erupted. Several counselors looked at one another in shock. The Queen's eyes hardened. "Bring him here," she commanded. The side doors opened. Guards entered, dragging the advisor between them. His fine robes were torn, but his chin was still lifted in arrogance. "Your Majesty," he began smoothly, "surely you do not believe this fabrication. The human has—" "Silence," the Queen snapped, her voice like steel. "The evidence speaks for itself." For the first time, the advisor's confident mask cracked. "You cannot trust a human's word." "It is not just his word," Lyra cut in, her voice clear and strong. "It is mine, and I am your princess." The hall erupted again, but this time the voices were not filled with doubt. They were filled with anger at the betrayal and awe at her return. The Queen rose from her throne and descended the steps, her gaze fixed on her daughter. For a heartbeat, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Then the Queen's voice broke, the silence not with judgment but with raw emotion. "Mother, I'm back. He saved me." The words were not shouted, but spoken with the deep, unshakable truth of someone who had walked through danger and returned home. Lyra's voice trembled, but only because it carried everything she had endured. The Queen's eyes softened, her stern posture breaking. She stepped forward and embraced her daughter before the entire court. When the Queen looked at Elias again, something had changed. No longer was her gaze sharp with suspicion. It was tempered with respect. "You are far from your home, human," she said. "Yet you carried my daughter across the stars, through danger and betrayal, and brought her back to me. You ask for nothing, but I will offer what no human has been given before." She turned to the assembled court. "Let it be known, Elias Ward is a friend of the Dominion. No harm shall come to him here." The hall filled with murmurs, some approving, some reluctant, but none dared challenge the Queen's word. The advisor was taken away under heavy guard, his fate to be decided by the Queen's judgment. Already messages were being sent to allies across the Dominion, undoing the false accusations against humans. The shadow of war began to lift. Lyra stood beside Elias, her voice low enough for only him to hear. "You could have left me 12 times, but you didn't. That is something I will never forget." Elias gave a small smile. "You made it hard to walk away." Her lips curved faintly in return. "Good. Then perhaps our boorish bond will last." Later, when the court had emptied, and the sun began to set, Elias stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The towers glowed in warm gold, and the air was filled with the faint hum of airships moving between the spires. Lyra joined him, her expression softer now. "So, what will you do?" Elias looked out at the horizon. "I'm not sure. My ship's still mine. The stars are still out there, but maybe I'll stick around a little longer." "You would be welcome," she said. "Not just by me, but by the Queen herself. And that is rare for a human." He chuckled. "Guess I'm good at breaking rules without meaning to." That night, in the quiet halls of the palace, the story of the human and the princess began to spread beyond the city walls. Traders whispered it in markets, pilots told it over comm channels, and in distant ports, people spoke of the day a human walked into the Soren throne hall and changed the course of 2 worlds. Some called it luck, others called it fate. But for Elias and Lyra, it was simply the truth of what they had lived. A truth forged in danger, carried across the stars and sealed with trust. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the Dominion, the Queen herself remembered. The moment her daughter's voice had broken through her doubt, "Mother, I'm back. He saved me." The words would echo in her mind for the rest of her life.